What is freedom? It's a word or even a rallying cry that's brought into the forefront of many people's minds because of the late Charlie Kirk and his famous t-shirt that simply said freedom across the front. Now, of course, it was after his life was taken for trying to promote that freedom and those t-shirts, and more importantly, that idea, it became more precious to people than ever before. But what did Charlie and others like Charlie mean when they spoke about freedom? Because if you ask many people today, what is freedom? They'll say something like, well, it's doing whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it. But is that really freedom? Is that the type of freedom that Charlie died to promote? I would argue not at all. It's a very important discussion, so we're going to look at it today. Let's dig into it. In a life full of 5 minutes, you'll realize that doing whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, it virtually guarantees you won't have any true freedom at all, because you end up becoming a slave to your destructive desires and every last whim that you have. The radical left, they talk about freedom often, but what do they mean by that? And is it really true freedom? It's personal liberty, perhaps, to do exactly what they want to do, to smoke dope, to commit sexual immorality, to abort their babies, to mutilate their bodies, to pretend like they're something that they're not. But all these so-called freedoms, they could be practiced within a prison cell. So you could be a prisoner of the state and still have all these so-called freedoms that the radical left are so passionate about pursuing. But what do conservatives mean by freedom? Well, that's something very different. That's freedom for households. For example, to move from one city to another, to start a business and not get that business taxed to the point where it's not viable, to teach and train their kids in truth and not propaganda and lies, to live in a way where we say no to many things so that true human flourishing can take place. So the question becomes freedom from what and freedom for what? And the problem that we've encountered with many radicals is that personal freedom to destroy their own lives and to poison the society around them, well, that's not enough, because on top of that, we all must be forced to affirm their choices and pretend like they aren't poor choices. Oh, and see them as victims of an oppressive system when they face the consequences of their own actions, whether those consequences are legal issues, failed relationships, mental or physical health problems. So they want the liberty to make their bed however they want, but when they realize that they have to lie in it and it's not a very nice bed, well, then that's someone else's fault. As my family likes to say, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. And that brings me to the next important piece of this whole freedom business, which is personal responsibility. What if, for example, you really loved highly processed foods and you just ate whatever you wanted to eat whenever you wanted to eat it? Is that really freedom? Well, sure, in some sense, but you'll very quickly become imprisoned by your lack of physical health and capabilities. And now freedom in the world, well, that's been limited to you. Or what about the man in his 20s who doesn't have a job and he lives at his parents' house, just plays PlayStation all day long? Sure, he might feel free to do what he wants in the moment, but how great is that going to be long term? To become completely dependent on his parents. He doesn't have true freedom, not freedom to have opportunities to make something of his life, to contribute to his community, to attract a wife, to receive rewards for hard work and sacrifice. He'll have no real purpose, and that is a prison for young men. In John 8:34, Jesus says, truly, truly, which is like super truly, which is saying something because everything he says is true. But he says, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. And so is freedom really living without boundaries? If I walked up to you and I said, let's play a game, and you say, all right, to which I say, you move first, you'd likely stare at me blankly, wondering what on earth I was doing. And the first thing you'd want to know is, well, what's the aim of the game? What are the rules? A game without rules can be seen as freedom, but is it any fun? Does it have any purpose? No, it has no direction. No one's going to enjoy it, not for long anyway. And this is because doing anything you want whenever you want is not freedom. Just like a game of chess is no fun without rules, and you wouldn't go listen to an orchestra that just played away randomly whenever they felt like it. This applies across all of life. For example, in marriage, a husband and a wife, they have made a covenant to restrict their romantic affections to each other and each other alone. And that is a boundary that you could wrongly argue restricts freedom. But what does it actually do? It provides emotional security for the couple and for their children, among many other things. And so everyone in that family, they operate with a greater level of freedom because of the security and trust and belonging that marriage boundaries provide. And so the truth is, real freedom can only exist within the framework of rules and boundaries. And this goes back to the Old Testament. When God liberated the Israelites from Egypt, it wasn't so that they could do whatever they wanted, however they wanted, wherever they wanted, but so they could be free to worship Him. And this is something that they couldn't do as Pharaoh's slaves. And then what did God do? He gave them the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai and the rest of the law. And these commands, they were full of do nots, full of restrictions, things they weren't allowed to do. Do not steal, do not murder, do not commit adultery. Imagine our country today if we followed all of these do nots. Our court system would virtually be redundant. Families and marriages, they would thrive, and yet we don't. And so our families and communities, they suffer. So a lack of following do nots leads to a lack of true freedom. The simple truth is that unrestrained human beings are not truly free. They are prisoners to their own desires. So how do we become truly free? Well, we need to know the truth and the reason for which we were created. This phone or computer that you're watching this on right now, it was created for a purpose. So is your car, so is your oven. And if you tried to use them for each other's purposes, it wouldn't get you very far. And this is true for human beings. We were created for a purpose, and we need to know what that purpose is. And our purpose from a biblical perspective is to be free to love God. So if you truly want to be free, don't resist all rules and restraints, but instead embrace the right restraints, the most important ones being the ones that God has commanded us to live by. He did design us after all, so He knows what causes us to thrive and what hurts us. And if you're an atheist and all this God talk, it frustrates you, His commands are still undeniably the best way to live, and you don't have to know and love God to reap the benefits for living in the way that He says is best for you. New Zealand is seen as a secular nation now, but we're still benefiting from a justice system that operates on the assumptions of many biblical truths, like justice, for example. And as you can imagine, many other commands of God, they are baked into our legal framework here in New Zealand. And we just all know that to break these commands of God that are in our legal system, that's wrong. And the people that do so, they need to be held to account. And the further we move away from true justice, biblical justice, the more our country will pay the price. And so true freedom is achieved by adhering to the right restrictions, and personal freedom is achieved, as the great ex-Navy SEAL Jocko Willink says, through discipline, through doing things that we don't always feel like doing, because feelings, they're a horrible dictator for our lives anyway. You'll remember Jack Sparrow's compass, the one that pointed in the direction of whatever he wanted most in the world. What a disaster that was. And so embrace the right disciplines in your life, and you will have a freedom that is truly worth having. A freedom where instead of being a slave to your every desire and a slave to sin, you can be free to live in a way that you were designed to live. But for this, you're going to need some help, because the Bible teaches that we are all slaves to our evil and selfish desires. And the answer to being truly free is in the one who made us and the one who lived a perfect life to save us. Because He died and conquered death, we can be truly set free. John 8:36 says, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." The world's version of freedom, the so-called freedom the radical left often fight for, it just brings personal and community-wide destruction. The freedom Jesus offers is here on earth and for eternity. So I encourage you to follow Him and experience what true freedom really is in your life, in your family's lives, and in the life of our nation. Oh, and don't allow yourself to be manipulated and bullied into celebrating these self-destructive choices that we see so often pushed forward in our culture. Charlie had to pay for pushing back on these destructive lies with his life, as he was out trying to talk to the very people who were held captive by them. He was out there trying to set them free because he was set free, and he knew what true freedom was like. And he did that despite the threat to his own life. And that is why he's considered a martyr, and rightly so. And so we're going to finish now with some words from Charlie Kirk himself.
It's not going to brighten unless we turn up the lights. And the only way you do that is with courage. And so I could be like, oh boy, life is so tough, and, keep your head down and do all this and, just try to lie to get a good grade. Or I could tell you, you know what? Life goes by like this. And I don't want to live as a coward. And I don't want that for you either. Because you know what a coward is? A coward is someone who is somebody different in public than they are in private. They have well, I have to be somebody in my dorm room, and then once I'm outside, I have to pretend like I'm for all the SJW nonsense. What you're deciding to be is the same person in every environment, regardless of where you go, all the time. And you know who that is? That's a person who's free.
Charlie Kirk was free, and he is even more so now. And he would tell you that is because he was set free by the Son. And so he is truly free indeed.